Jewish of America can strengthen Israeli states?
Well, first we need to strengthen ourselves in our commitment to the Jewish people, to our history, to our rights as Jews in the land of Israel. Unfortunately, many of our Jews in America, instead of strengthening their own sense of belonging to Israel, are joining forces with the enemies of Israel. The 92nd Street Y recently invited a author of the famous book Color Purple, Alice Walker, who's the leader of the boycott and divestments, a woman who refused to have her book translated into Hebrew because she thinks that Israel is oppressing the Arabs, the Palestinians. So this woman is invited to the 92nd Street Y, a major Jewish organization. The other synagogues invite members of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and other enemies of Israel in their attempt to demonstrate how liberal they are. We have forgotten our history, and we have forgotten the efforts of our people to return to the land of Israel. And I think that the first thing that we can do is educate our people, teach them, educate them into what are our principles, what is our history, and thus also to send to Israel that message as well. Because unfortunately, there are many Jews in Israel who have forgotten that principle, who have forgotten that history, and they are so obsessed with making peace that they've forgotten what the rights are. Unfortunately, we have a great enemy, and we Jews in America should help the Israelis who sometimes are exhausted from their own struggles, and strengthen in them the sense of history and knowledge.
Why it's so hard to make Aliyah to Israel?
Well, there are many reasons why people don't make Aliyah. Unfortunately, change of society, very difficult. Sometimes jobs, financial, family. But we do. I think, first of all, more and more people now I see are buying property in Israel. They're visiting Israel more often. Their children, many of them have families. We have children in Israel, living in Israel now. So it's much easier now. The bridges are not as difficult as they were before. Still, we still need to get more. I think there are organizations that are helping make Aliyah, and I think we need to strengthen them more. I think that one of the main tasks of the land of Eretz Israel, of the state of Israel, should be to encourage that kind of education. But I think that it should be done from the perspective of the return of Jews to Israel. Because if you don't want just to emigrate to another country. The only reason I want to go to Eretz Israel is because there is something going on in Israel that is a Jewish resurgence. So a government that does not emphasize the Jewish resurgence, it simply emphasizes economic or housing opportunities, is not going to be as attractive. The dream of going to Eretz Israel needs to be revived. The dream of the Zionist dream to build Eretz Israel. So I think that we as leaders of the American Jewry are trying to encourage, both in Israel and here in America, the return to our history and our literature.
The hot issue in the Middle East is Iran. Do you think Israeli can trust states to support her in the moment of the time?
Well, right now, I'm not sure that any country can rely on the United States to support them. President Obama is in a new policy of retreat and disengagement, and uninterested in participating in any kind of conflict. So, out of the United States, there's no one that Israel can rely on. Perhaps the only people who are interested in supporting Israel are the Arab nations that probably will be the targets of Iran, like Saudi Arabia. I think Israel needs to consider its own actions very soon. I know that it is dangerous, that the response by the Iranians could cause tragedy in Israel, victims in Israel. I'm aware of that. But if we allow the Iranians to have a bomb, the tragedy could be many times worse. They will not hold the bomb. Iranians are very dangerous. Whether Israel can do the whole job, or just do part of the job and limit them, just show them that they're going to suffer and consequences, that's also good enough. Israel can do a lot of damage to the infrastructure of Iran, and hopefully create a kind of, in Iranian people, a desire to change. I think that America may participate and help them, after Israel attacks, maybe not before, and it creates circumstances that will be helpful. But Israel needs to make its own decisions, its own fate, and not rely on anybody else.
Lately we see a terror activity in Boston, in Europe. What do you think America learned about all these events? And what does it mean about Israel?
Well, unfortunately, the first thing that I would say is that we should eliminate one word from our vocabulary, the word terror. Terror is not the enemy. Terror is simply a method of intimidating, destroying, and dominating us. The question is who's doing it, not what they're doing. We know they're doing it. And the problem is that the Western governments, are refusing to identify who the enemy is. The enemy is a group of Islamic people, not necessarily extremists, religious Islamists who believe, as the Quran says, that Islam should dominate the world, and they are doing it. What's so difficult to understand? They're doing what the Quran tells them to do. So until our Western leaders are going to begin to recognize that that's a threat, and either fight it in some political, cultural way, or we are never going to resolve the problem. The Cameron, the day after this savage killed this innocent soldier and had blood in his hand and was screaming Allahu Akbar and said, "We are going to fight with you," and he refused to identify the enemy. He didn't even mention the word Islam. And of course then came all the Islamic leaders to say, this has nothing to do with Islam. Nothing to do with Islam. The mosques that preach that we have to kill the infidels, the mosques that say that we have to dominate the world, these mosques are not telling these people to go around killing us. How can you say there's nothing to do with Islam? And our leaders are refusing to admit that. So it has to do a lot with Israel, because in the middle of this tremendous upheaval of the Arab world that we call the Arab Spring, the Secretary of State Kerry goes to Israel and wants to push the negotiations of the Israeli and Palestinians. What does it have to do with the main problem of the world is in Benghazi, in Iran, in Syria, in Africa, in Mali. These are the big problems, not the problems that he should spend time. And that, I think, is there is a kind of myopia. People do not see correctly, and they think all the problems begin and end with Israel. And I think that it's easier to move Netanyahu to meet with Abbas than it is to deal with the mosques and the clerics of Islam, who are really the enemy that is destroying and creating these bombers.
What's your opinion about women of the war? You see the activity in the Kotel. Do you think this is right or wrong?
Well, I think that I have no objection to women praying whatever they want to do in their own places, in their own synagogues, in their own meeting halls. If they want to do it, whether they're doing it for the sake of heaven or not for the sake of heaven, I'm not to judge. But to come to the Kotel and to disrespect the place of tradition, it is unthinkable. Would they do the same thing entering Buckingham Palace, behaving in a way that the British would not agree? Would they enter to see the Pope in St. Peter's without the proper attire and the proper behavior? Why is it that the etiquette in Buckingham Palace and the Vatican is more important than the etiquette in the Kotel? There's an etiquette, there's a tradition. These people want to destroy it. The government of Israel should act towards them with a simple sense of the law. And that's it. Now, there is no question, and I'm very sad that the conservative movement and the reform movement are not acting in that way. We're not talking here about the rights of women. We're talking here about the traditions of our people. The Kotel is a sacred place which has been maintained by people who go every day, every morning, every night. These are the people who have a certain tradition. They don't go every once in a while. They should be respected too. That's their etiquette. That they are called Orthodox or Haredim doesn't really matter. The Kotel has its own etiquette, and we should protect it. The women of the wall should be simply dealt with the force of what the law is in Israel. My problem is, I think that in Israel, we always think about the rights of everybody, but we are forgetting the main rights of the Jewish people is our history. And we do not have leaders in Israel who have the pride of being Jewish and who can come and say, this is our history, this place is holy. We need always to make peace with everybody. I'm wondering, I think that people should think, what would the Queen of England say